And we'll just make it really informal here, so I'll kind of just kick off. Today we have Mark from Disputifier, who's one of our partners here in the chargeback management space. So Mark, welcome to our kind of our first of our series of guests that we're looking to have on the Competence YouTube and also our Academy. So definitely glad to have you in, and looks like you're in a better spot than my office. So I guess give us a little bit of background on yourself. And it sounds like you were traveling a little bit, but would love to hear kind of your story, your background, and what brought you to your position you're at today.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having me on. Super honored to be your first guest. Wow. But yeah, super happy to chat here. Just a quick intro on myself. My name is Mark Wagner. Right now I run Disputifier, which is a chargeback management company for e-com brands. And the reason why I run Disputifier is because I initially started off as an e-com merchant, kind of did that whole drop shipping, branding thing for years and years and years. Back dating to, I want to say like 2016 was when I first kind of dabbled into that space, which was still very much the Wild West of, Facebook ads and drop shipping and e-com in general. So yeah, just found that there were very little solutions in regards to chargebacks. So it kind of got me, down this whole rabbit hole of payments and chargebacks, which ended up leading us together. Obviously, there's a ton of correlation there in those two worlds. But yeah, super happy to be here and really happy to have, kind of been able to transition into something to really help e-com brand owners, because it's hard enough running a brand, so hopefully we can make their lives a little bit less hard.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, it's cool to hear your story. I think we interacted was maybe like 6-8 months ago, something like that. But I think what was appealing, just one of our outreaches to you, was that you actually ran brands. And again, we work with just international sellers and or even domestic sellers as well. But kind of walk me through that journey a little bit. So you mentioned that you ran some brands, were in the drop shipping space. Where did you see this major gap in like the chargeback management space? You're like, man, I want to go into payments. I want to go into helping merchants like myself at the time, manage their operations more fluidly. Like, what pulled you into it?
100%. Initially, it wasn't even this whole big thing that was like, oh, I want to turn this into a software. Like, I want to go get thousands of merchants. Like, it was really just like, holy shit, we're losing so much money due to chargebacks. And we tried a couple of the solutions out there. Like, we had issues with fraud, just like tons of people that, I don't know, maybe someone got a fraud order through one day and they were just like, guys, like, this is the store, So we just got constant fraud attacks, which was super annoying. So we tried a bunch of like really cheap and also really expensive software around that. And what we found was the really cheap stuff didn't work and the really expensive stuff was really expensive. And then we tried some stuff on the recovery side of things too. So like being able to respond to chargebacks in a more automated way, and then like ideally win them, right? Because we were winning like 20-25% of chargebacks at the time. Initially, I just had VAs responding to all the chargebacks like most people do. Well, I guess initially it was myself. and I just read out, this customer sucks, like they're lying, they're scamming us. And then it moved on to my VAs doing it. But they weren't really winning chargebacks anyway. They were doing customer service, right? Chargebacks were just kind of like that thing I delegated unsuccessfully. And then we tried another big company in the chargeback space, and it was supposed to be this whole automated thing, and like we didn't have to do anything. And I was like, all right, this is going to be the one. And then they took like 2.5 months to onboard us, and it turned out to not be fully automated. Like we still did do a ton of work. And it was expensive. So I was just like, all right, screw this. Like, there's clearly an opportunity in the market for a solution that works if you're not like a 9-figure brand with huge budgets to spend on this and a ton of time to figure out these complex systems. So my goal is just like, all right, let's fix it for my brands. Let's see what we can do to fix this problem internally. And then it kind of just went to, all right, well, my friends also have this problem. Let me get them on this. That was when we initially brought it to the Shopify App Store. And then, it just kind of took off organically, I would say. We weren't really like trying. I was doing e-com up until a couple of years ago, and just sort of grew. I think the problem only got worse, to be honest, with the COVID boom. And I think the rise of U.S. consumers realizing that they can just get anything for free anytime they want. So it's been good. That's kind of how we've we've been able to grow it.
So yeah, just kind of unpacking that. Obviously, you've been through a lot as an online seller yourself, but like I think the two things that you mentioned a couple times were it was like the lack of ease or automation, right? It sounds like it was very difficult to get set up with like an actual solution that benefited you. To me, it's like super easy to deal with you guys. That's why you're one of our premier partners. Like, kind of walk me through that. Like, how do people find you and like how do they set up? Because it seems like it just takes like a day. It's very simple.
Yeah. 100%. The whole goal for our platform is not to be like this whole big thing that you have to log into and manage and keep up with and all that kind of stuff. The platform is really just like initial setup and analytics.
Right.
Like it's not designed for you to be in the weeds and have some other thing that you have to worry about managing. It's really just designed for plug it into your Shopify store, plug it into your Stripe account, any other processors, any other CRMs, whether that be PayPal or Klarna or whatever, set it all up. May take 2 minutes, may take 10, depending on your processors, right? But after you go through that initial setup process, pretty much nothing you need to do, right? So the whole goal is for it to be actually automated. Because when I was trying out solutions as a merchant, it just never was. It was marketed as automated, but it wasn't in reality. So yeah, the whole goal is for merchants to just like be able to plug it in really quickly. If they're on Shopify, it's super simple. We're just on the App Store. It takes 2 clicks to add it. And then we're on the Stripe App Store as well. And then we work with any other platforms too. So they just kind of plug it up, sign up, and then just integrate all their processors and CRMs. And then they're kind of never having to worry about chargebacks again.
Good to go, man. So, again, I think we kind of collided when, again, we work, obviously we keep mentioning like online sellers, and then we really kind of focus on the space of like, startup to, let's say they're doing 5 million, 10 million a month in some cases. But a lot of like, clients that probably are going to be watching this video, part of the academy, they don't really understand like why do chargebacks come in, right? There's like these root cause issues. Like when you're looking at it for like a startup merchant, like what are kind of like the common reasons that consumers charge back? Like, there's different buckets, like they call it friendly fraud, where people may see something on their bank statement they don't remember and they just charge it back. Or maybe it's product not as like described, or maybe it's shipping. Like what are kind of like the core issues on chargebacks that you see for, let's say, a merchant that's just starting and trying to grow their brand?
Yeah, for sure. So there's obviously buckets, right? It would be inappropriate to just say all chargebacks are caused by one reason. And you do get reasons with your chargebacks, but I think it's important to understand like the actual root causes behind those reasons, right? So I think number one, a common pitfall I see a ton of merchants just fall into, especially the ones that are just starting out, like you said, because often they're drop shipping or they just don't have much inventory on hand because they're brand new. I just got to say is like supply chain and shipping. Like you're an e-commerce business. You're selling physical products. You need to make sure you're getting those to customers in a short amount of time. We've all been accustomed to getting orders in 2 days because of Amazon. And like it or not, that's what we're used to. So, if you're selling to US consumers, I think you really just need to make sure that your shipping is on point. Now, it's possible to have shipping that is 8 to 10 days, sometimes 12, because they're shipping from China. And it's possible to mitigate the chargebacks that are going to be associated with that. But if you're selling out your inventory, you're taking pre-orders, you're not telling people how long it's going to take to get their order, then you're going to get a ton of chargebacks. So I think you just have to really, really be clear about shipping times. And if you're sold out, if you're on pre-orders, if you aren't managing your inventory and your stock levels well, then you're just going to get wrecked. So that's, I think, number one, very, 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 very important. And then I was talking about like kind of communicating properly your shipping times or processing times, stuff like that. But that goes for everything. Like communication, I think, is key to avoiding chargebacks. And that goes for pretty much every single reason. So product not received. We already covered that. Product unacceptable, like product quality. I totally get sales. I totally get marketing, right? You want to make your product seem like the best thing in the world. Makes sense. I understand. However, there's definitely a line there, right? There's a line in terms of disclosures. There's a line in terms of the way that you market things. If you're saying that your supplement is going to cure cancer, then like you're probably going to get some patients charging back, So I would definitely just say that like communication in terms of everything, like keeping customers up to date on their order post acquisition, post purchase is really, really
Yep.
important. And that education post purchase as well, but also pre purchase. Like, what does your product page look like? How are you selling? How are you marketing this? Do you have like a very clear, if you offer subscriptions, is that clear? Does it have all the proper terms and disclosures? And same thing goes for shipping. Same thing goes for product quality. I just think communication, super, super important. If you're not doing it, if you're just like, oh, conversion rate goes up if I don't say this, then like, you just have to be really, really prepared to accept the chargebacks that come with that. And then the last bucket I would say is fraud. Like I mentioned, we got hit with a ton of fraud. I see some stores that just never run into it, and I'm so happy for them, right? You may get the occasional fraud chargeback from like a real customer that purchased and they say it's friendly fraud, or they say it's fraud, but they made that purchase with their credit card, right? So that's called friendly fraud. It's when typically a customer will just order from you. Maybe they forget they ordered from you. Maybe they don't recognize the charge. Maybe they just want their money back for some reason or another, and they just charge back. They call it fraud. Now that's going to happen with a percentage of your orders always, but there can be a much more devious type of fraud, which is like actual criminal fraud. This is typically when you get targeted by typically like overseas fraud rings that bulk purchase credit card numbers on the dark web, like hundreds of thousands to millions of credit card numbers. And then they just have automated systems to essentially go purchase from a ton of Shopify stores and hope they don't catch it. And even if 1 or 2 or 10% of those orders get through, it's obviously worth it for these guys who are either like reselling it on Amazon or another platform, or they're just doing some sort of thing to get free products and benefit from it financially. So again, some stores never get into this, but if you scale, you will run into this. Like every 9-figure brand we work with has like a constant battle against resellers, against fraudsters. So it's super important, I think, to at least have a strategy around that. If you're just getting started, if you have 10 orders a day, maybe don't worry about it. But if you start to get hit with a lot of fraud chargebacks, and often it can accelerate really, really quickly once the fraudsters kind of catch on to the fact that there's a little exploitation there that's possible. I think that's just really, really important to understand and just know how you can combat that.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Fraud, I mean, is definitely like evolved. I mean, it continues. You got to stay on top of your game, obviously, as a dispute management and fraud mitigation tool. Back in the day, like, chargebacks and like dispute management was really geared for like if you lost your card or your card data was stolen, right? And then you can initiate a chargeback, protects the consumer. But now there's such a wide range of kind of reasons where a consumer can charge back. One of the things a lot of people don't realize is the length of time, right? Like everyone essentially is a consumer, but as a business owner, you're always looking at it like, you don't realize like it could be in most cases, it's 6 months, but what are the ranges of times that you see typically when people charge back? Like what's the average time frame that you see? Like, is it within 30 days of purchase, 60 days? And then just from like an education perspective for viewers, what are the timelines in which somebody can charge back? Is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? I know some cards like Amex, it could be longer, but I'll defer to you to answer that.
Great question. So yeah, like you mentioned, typically customers have up to 6 months to charge back. I've seen it charge back as long as 2 years. So I believe that the card issuers can kind of override that as they see fit. But typically the standard is 6 months. And could be a little bit more, like you mentioned, depending on like the actual issuer, whether it's Amex, Discover, they all can have their own rules, but 6 months is just a good general time frame. And then most customers are typically going to be charging back within I would say 2 to 6 week period after their order. Right. So we see a lot of chargebacks hit like end of month, beginning of the month, just because I think customers maybe are like looking through their billing statements and like kind of checking over everything end of month. They may see something they'll recognize. I know I do that sometimes, they have this weird billing descriptor and I may charge it back or reach out or whatever. So there's always going to be a spike at the end of the month, beginning of the month, but typically you're going to see that first chargeback hit within a couple weeks of the purchase. I've seen it as quickly as, just a day or two right after the purchase. Just barely waiting for it to get settled before you charge back. But it's typically going to come in a couple weeks after that initial transaction. And also sometimes chargebacks do take a while to come in. So someone can
Mm-hmm.
file a chargeback and it may not hit for like 5 days, 7 days sometimes after the chargeback is filed. So that's another reason why there's a couple week delay typically there with a chargeback coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, because a lot of times, a lot of businesses don't realize. I mean, it can come back 6 months later in a lot of cases, and I've seen cases like you mentioned, like a year and a half later, it's coming in as well. So just have to be prepared. It's kind of the cost of doing business. You just have to make sure that you're dotting your I's, crossing your T's in terms of just like website policy, being very disclosing like your shipping times or like product quality, no gimmicks, no, hey, we're going to cure cancer with this pill, whatever it may be. But yeah, I guess in terms of credit cards, that kind of hits on the credit card. So essentially, if I were just to describe it, a chargeback alert almost is more of like a need to have, right? So like you're setting up with the payment processor and you get a chargeback that comes in and it's through Stripe, right? That negatively impacts your account, right? And there's certain thresholds that providers have, and most of them, if you look at it, and again, just if I do some napkin math here, if you have 100 transactions, you want to be at 1 chargeback or less. Like 1% chargeback rate is high, essentially. You want to be at 0.5 ideally, or 0.75 is kind of the threshold. So as an online seller, you want to look at it out of every, I would say 150 transactions, and 1 chargeback would be acceptable, right? If we're just doing, again, just some basic napkin math here.
Borderline acceptable at that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So especially if you're new, so you got to be very careful in terms of how you scale and approach it. Now, I almost look at like chargeback alerts. It's almost like an insurance policy in a way. You're driving a car without insurance, you can get in an accident. Well, that's going to be way more expensive now, right? And I kind of look at it, there's some parallels there. I think with chargeback alerts, again, just the mechanics of it, just walking through this and explaining this to people that may not even know what a chargeback alert is. But basically, if a chargeback is initiated, the issuing bank will then ping the network that, hey, a chargeback was initiated by the consumer. And then you'll be notified as a merchant that a chargeback comes in. And then what happens from there, Mark? So like, it's not going to hit the processing account as a chargeback right away. What are the actions that the merchant has at this time now that they can take?
Great question. So it partially depends on the type of alert. There are kind of a handful of different types of alerts that all sort of function differently, but the main types of alerts essentially function like this. An issuer receives a chargeback and then they ping Visa or MasterCard. And then they essentially check a database to see if that merchant is enrolled in chargeback alerts. If they are enrolled in chargeback alerts, then Visa and MasterCard send a response back to the bank that says, hey, put this on hold. I think we're going to be able to get this one resolved, right? And then they give us as the provider, or maybe directly the merchant, another provider, they give them the alert and they say, hey, this transaction just got charged back. You have approximately 48 hours to refund this transaction or we're pushing it through. And you need to tell us once it's been refunded, or if you weren't able to refund it for some reason, tell us that as well. So we go in, we process a refund, or sometimes the merchant wants to look over it. They may choose to fight it. They may choose to process the refund. We're going to look at a variety of criteria set by the merchant to determine if we want to refund that or if we want to go ahead and fight that charge back. But let's just say we refund it. We're going to tell Visa and MasterCard, hey, this transaction's been refunded. Don't file a charge back. As long as that's done within 48, sometimes up to 72 hours, then the chargeback is not going to go through. So like you mentioned, it's essentially like insurance. You don't want to have chargebacks, but if you do have chargebacks, you really don't want them to affect your ratio, especially as a smaller business where every single chargeback gets scrutinized to the highest degree. So that's a really, really good analogy for it, I think.
Yeah. So essentially, just to kind of summarize, a chargeback alert allows you to provide you the option to refund, and then you can resolve it amicably with the client, or you can fight it if you want. In most cases, it's not worth it to fight it because there's time you have to invest to put the chargeback template together, send it all in, and then a lot of times you lose. Like it's a coin flip, right? If it's product not described, or they say they didn't get the item, you have to compel the issuing bank, whoever the underwriter is, you have to compel them to say that the consumer, their customer, is in the wrong. right? So the merchant, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent in a way. So kind of it works backwards, really. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, they
Oh,
take the money from you and then they make you fight for your money back. Like it's kind of nuts. Yeah. It's very
Yeah.
stacked against the merchant. So a lot of merchants, you know, are going to just want to take that and not have to worry about their dispute ratio getting high. And then some merchants are going to be in between. Some merchants are going to like, you know, want to refund everything below a certain amount. They want to fight everything above a certain amount. They may want to refund all the fraud ones, but not the product not received ones, all that kind of stuff. Definitely doable. And it really just depends on the merchant specifically. Because I wouldn't say every merchant needs chargeback alerts, but a lot of merchants need chargeback alerts.
Yeah, a lot. The high majority of them, I'd say 90% that I deal with. Especially if I just think if you're new, it's almost like a no-brainer because, especially if you start to scale fast, a lot of guys are testing or they're really trying to find the product market fit, and they pop, and then they have one dispute, then everything gets like closed down, right? And you've been seeing this too. We've been working together on some of these issues. But yeah, it used to be more of a nice to have. I think it's almost a need to have in most cases now versus where it was a nice to have before. So
100%, especially if you're with a Stripe, a Shopify payments, those processors that just don't care about you, you know, and they just really sensitive algorithms that are extremely unfriendly to any amount of chargebacks.
Yep, exactly. So, well, this is really good. I mean, in terms of just understanding your view of it, you know, again, Mark, you were a merchant, which is great because you relate to the merchants that you're working with. You understand just the things that are needed behind the hood of a merchant's business. And so definitely it's been great working with you because the nice thing on our side was that, you know, we can prescribe what you offer, but we're also kind of finding those root cause issues and like, I call it like untangling Christmas lights sometimes. Like you don't have the time to kind of go through the education piece where I can go through the education piece, sit back and kind of get them right size, and then they can scale and it's all good. So in terms of like your competitors, like you mentioned them in the beginning, you don't have to drop names, but like, you know, what separates you? I think that the main thing is you have a really easy native Shopify application. And I think you're really focused on the Shopify ecosystem. Is that like kind of what would be your competitive advantage against, you know, if I'm looking at chargeback alert providers or fraud detection, however you want to describe it, why would I pick Disputifier versus other ones that are out there?
For sure. So there's definitely a lot of reasons. I think number one, we have the most complete platform for e-com merchant shipping physical products, right? You can't find a single provider out there that fights chargebacks, meaning they respond to chargebacks, they win them back. Chargeback alerts, like we just went into really in-depth fraud prevention. And then we also have order not received prevention. This is literally the whole stack that I had to piece together as a merchant, pay astronomical amounts of money for it because they were all their own individual platforms and they all needed to be good because it's really important to have that stuff working. So I was paying off the ass for it. And because we consolidate all those solutions into one platform, it's all really like very, very competitive pricing. So, you know, we don't need to make all the money off fraud prevention or recovering chargebacks or chargeback alerts because we have the whole stack. We have everything that you need as a merchant to help mitigate chargebacks as well as just mitigate business issues, right? So it's everything you would ever need for preventing chargebacks. And then anything that doesn't get through, we're going to recover. We're going to fight and probably win back. So we're kind of, I would say, uniquely positioned in that sense of like, it's very e-com focused, you know, very Shopify dominant and heavy, like you had mentioned. Certainly work with non-Shopify merchants, but a lot of it is just like very, very tailor built for the traditional e-com physical product, you know, e-com merchant. And that I think definitely sets us apart. And then we've also gone really deep in our alerts product. So there's like the legacy competitors, I would say, you know, the Chargebacks 911 and stuff like that. And I wouldn't say we really like cross toes with them too much, but we're kind of this middle ground, right? Because there were a lot that came after us. We were started in 2020. There's been a lot more that have kind of popped up. All of them typically seem to have charge in their name. So, you know, we're kind of in our own realm with Disputifier. But so with that, I think the fact that we've been doing this longer, we've been able to develop some of the systems to really help with the common issues with alerts, whereas like some people may not really be aware of some of these issues. Maybe they've done this a year or two. That's great. But I mean, we've processed like millions of chargebacks, right? Quite a lot of alerts. So we understand all of the issues that may not seem like they're big issues, but at scale, they're big issues. And I mean, with alerts, it's possible to have like false positives with your alerts, meaning you get an alert and that consumer never charged back, right? And you just got an alert, you paid for an alert, you refunded the customer, and you were never going to get a charge back in the first place. So that's a big issue with essentially every provider in the space. And then the others is just like some other kind of intricate issues with alerts. Like you can have overlap. Like I said, there were a couple different types of alert programs, and multiple programs can trigger on a single transaction. So you're just overpaying, you're paying for duplicates. It's about 5 to 10% of your alerts. And we're talking 15 to 20% in false positives. Plus there's alerts you can't find because it's an Apple Pay, like tokenized card, and you may get an alert on a transaction that's already been refunded by your customer service team right before the alert came in. There's a variety of issues with alerts, and we're the only platform that really finds all of these issues and eliminates them. And if we do have any issues, we flag it automatically, and then we just give you your money back. So it's really emphasizing the issues that occur with alerts, whereas I think a lot of other providers in the space, they're not financially incentivized to do so. We're going to make less money, right, if we're just refunding 20% of your alerts and then like blocking out all the false positives and stuff like that. But ultimately, I'm okay with making less money if we can provide a more valuable solution to our merchants, and we just really care about that. And I don't really get the same type of care from other providers in the space.
Yeah, you actually educated me on this not too long ago. I think there's a couple providers that do this. So yeah, you can have duplicate charges for one chargeback because there's kind of 3 different rails or alert programs that are out there. And if it shows up on one, it could show up on another. And a lot of providers, they'll just bill you for both, right? So you're able to erase one of them and then just refund basically back.
Yeah, we always refund the more expensive alert too. So ultimately, there you go. You paying for the cheapest alert. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of stuff that like should just be basic common knowledge. Like, oh yeah, of course we're not going to charge you twice for the same transaction, the same chargeback. But unfortunately, you know, they just don't care.
That's just how it is, man. Yeah, so that's cool because you're able to. It's a loss, but it's a gain, right? Because the customers trust you no matter what. You gotta make sure the pricing's fair and equitable for everybody, and it makes sense, right? So all good. Just kind of wrapping up here, like what are some new products that you kind of have in queue that maybe you're looking to develop with your team? Like, is there anything out there that you see? It's like, man, we could do a lot better in this with what we currently have, or is there something new that you're looking to tackle with your team here in the future? Like what's kind of on your roadmap?
Good question. One thing we're working on is so alerts exist on cards. They exist on Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and Discover cards, but to a lesser degree Amex and Discover, right? It's mainly Visa, MasterCard. If you're on PayPal and you have issues with your dispute rate, you can't do alerts. They don't do alerts. They don't facilitate alerts. You can't. It's just non-compatible. However, with PayPal, they have kind of like their own internal dispute center, as everyone knows, right? And it's possible to essentially block the majority of those from counting against your PayPal dispute rate because it's only counted whenever it's escalated to PayPal. So typically, if a customer has an issue and they purchase from PayPal, they reach out to you directly on PayPal, and you have like a week or two to resolve that concern directly with the customer, which we always try to do by default, right? But right now, we haven't yet released anything that goes beyond that. We're just trying to win the money back for the merchant. But some merchants, they're like, all right, well, try to win my money back. But if it gets to the point where this is about to get escalated and count against my PayPal dispute rate, then I just want that transaction refunded. I don't want to worry about getting my money held in PayPal. I personally had some pretty large amounts held by PayPal, and they're just very, very strict with it, right? So if you can just prevent those disputes from getting escalated to PayPal, then most merchants should do that. So we're essentially building a solution right now where we're going to try to win the funds back while we still have that time window to work with the customer. And if we're not able to do so, if we can't come to a resolution with the customer, refunded right before
Yeah.
it gets escalated to PayPal, like the day before. That way it's not counting against your dispute ratio. So it's essentially a PayPal alert, right? But it's
Yeah.
not. There's one more company in the space that does this, and they just sell it as like a normal alert, as if it was like an Ethica or verified
Okay.
alert. So they're like $30, and it's like
Yeah.
it's a simple API automation. Like I think we're gonna charge like a couple dollars for it. So it's
Yeah.
like, I really enjoy doing that kind of stuff because it's just a helpful product for merchants. And,
Right.
again, we're not trying to make a ton of money. Like we're just trying to provide a fair and equitable solution. So,
Yep.
we're not going
Yep.
to be selling that as like the same price as the alerts that actually cost a lot of money for us. So I'm super
Yeah.
excited for that solution. There's very little like that right now. Like the other provider
Mhm.
that does this, they just auto refund everything versus trying to work with the customer first to come to a resolution, which I think is really important. You can probably mitigate, 50 to 70% of those refunds.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty
been baby
decent, right?
testing that. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, that'll be cool because that's always been like a block. I mean, typically if they're good, like, if a business is pretty sound, they will have somebody that will manage this because it goes from complaint to dispute. I want to say, or is it dispute to complaint? I think it goes from complaint to dispute in PayPal's system, right? Because it triggers you if there's a complaint, and then you have to address the complaint, and then it goes to the next step. But you're able to take it in that first step, try to win it. And then if you don't, or if you got a bad signal, then you can just refund it. But, a lot of merchants too, if they're pretty fundamentally sound, their win rates are pretty good. If they got a good, template and they got good evidencing process and they have like a good service agent, but it takes time to get there, right? So that would be cool. Yeah. Cause that's something that like a lot of people ask, can we just do the refunds? Right. And there's not an option really. So, yeah, that'd be really cool.
100%. I think there's some disputes you're not going to win,
Yeah.
If the item got lost and never got delivered, whatever, like you just want to refund that, so
Yeah.
we're going to take as much off of the merchant's plate as we possibly can. And I think that's one of the best ways to do it on PayPal.
Well, that's awesome, man. No, I definitely enjoyed just kind of understanding not only just your background, which, we talked before, but kind of getting into the weeds a little bit more and, kind of your journey and what the next steps in the process are. And obviously a pleasure working with you and your team. So where can potential customers find you? You mentioned the Shopify App Store. You're on LinkedIn quite a bit too, but like what's your preferred channel of communication?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you want to get in touch with me, feel free to hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn. My name is Mark Wagner, and the company is called Disputifier. That's Disputifier. So we're on the Shopify App Store, we're on the Stripe App Store. Google us. We're on most of the app stores out there, and we work with 5,000 plus e-com merchants. Would love to help if you're kind of like more in that mix, like I mentioned, physical product e-com, especially Shopify, very heavy. And I think we've really good solutions for most merchants that are scaling up. So yeah, would love to help if you guys are getting any chargebacks.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you again. We'll have on the actual call link, we're going to have a link to the onboarding platform that we have together for Disputifier. So again, that link is going to be just right below here in the Academy. So you can actually just self-enroll. It's super easy, like Mark mentioned. Click the link, you just register. And then once you do that, you actually can get an account manager assigned to your platform as well. So we'll make this enrollment easy. But again, if they want to reach out directly, again, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then again, we'll have that link for registration on the bottom of the Academy portal here. Pleasure connecting, Mark, and love the view, man. So I'm a little jealous.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Great chatting with you. And thanks for having me on as your first guest. It means a lot.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Cool.
100%. See ya.